Okay, so I'm getting coffee in Iowa City. There's a guy getting coffee in front of me. He's ordering. There's a barista there. And the guy ordering coffee says to the guy making coffee, "What are you doing this weekend?" The guy making coffee looks up and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to a concert." And then naturally the guy ordering coffee goes, "Oh, really? Who are you going to see?" And then the other guy stood up and I saw it in his face. Dave Matthews Band. And I felt for him. It was courageous. He put himself out there. That's hard. You know, you don't know how it's going to land. It hung there for really 10 seconds. And then the other guy goes, "Oh, I fucking love Dave Matthews." And I was so happy for them that they had this moment. I knew in my heart they were both wrong. I knew that. But I was happy for them. Because I'm a big-hearted, tolerant person.
Inside.
For clothes that Tristan
Welcome everyone to Money Me, a series that's going to turn your money woes into money woes.
Give me money, money me, money now, me a money needing a lot now.
We're excited to have our friend Bill Kenney, partner CEO of Focus Labs, back on the show. We previously had him on to talk about his new book, Conquer Your Rebrand, Build a B2B Brand that customers love and competitors envy. The book's out now, so use the link below to grab it for yourself, or 100 or 1,000. You'll give them to your closest friends as a big-hearted, caring person, as you are, as like Mark Maron there. But before we jump into things, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on content just like this, where we help you price your projects like a boss instead of the usual guess the number jelly beans in the jar approach.
So, Bill, you've had to deal with our cold open nonsense before as the first ever repeat guest. We talked a little bit before the show. It's like, I don't know if it's as prestigious as like my third time hosting SNL, but we're on our way there, and you'll always be the first ever repeat guest. So thanks again for coming on.
Coat for the fifth.
We're gonna hit you again with the first reaction to the cold open.
Well, let me first just say we all have to start somewhere. You all and me included. Cold open. I am a Dave Matthews fan. I wouldn't say I'm a super fan. I have not seen them, but I do enjoy some Dave Matthews.
Good, really good musicianship. As someone who is not very good at guitar, but has attempted a few songs, it's like, oh man, it's not just I can't just strum this and get it out of my system. So yeah. I'll always give him his weird chord shapes that I can't do.
It wasn't in the clip, but in the bit, Mark Maron kind of talks about like how within 30 seconds of listening to a Dave Matthews Band, he like experiences a level of boredom that causes like anger in him. And I feel like that's me. Like I appreciate the musicianship as a musician, but I was with my wife somewhere. We were like just hanging out, drinking a coffee or something like that, and it was playing in the background. And I had no idea it was playing. And like I was just like, I'm feeling like angry right now. I don't know what it is. She's like, it's the Dave Matthews Band that's playing in the background. Like, is that what that is? I was like, man, this is real. Like I'm really experiencing what Mark Maron's talking about.
My theory is they're all about like 45 seconds too long. And that's also kind of what makes Dave Matthews. Dave Matthews is like, it's not, they're like somewhere between like Fish, which is just like, those songs are however long. Fish is feeling like they need to be on that day, like Grateful Dead style. Yeah. And then just like pop music, which is like a tight 3.5 minutes and out. And they're like, how about 4 minutes 47 seconds. And it's like, inevitably, you're like, they
like,
didn't
wrap it up
edit
now.
down enough. Like, it's like the Bad Boys 2, a really weird reference where it's like, this is an action movie that's like 2 hours and 37 minutes long. Like, what are we doing here? We
Blow
could've
more
easily-
shit up. Come on.
Too much budget. So anyway, as always, thanks for humoring us on the cold open. Mark Maron alone talking about Dave Matthews, you're like, before you even hear his bit, you're like, this is not a Dave Matthews guy. Like, he would die at like a 4-hour Dave Matthews concert. So it's already funny the moment he starts talking about it.
Right. Well, we're obviously not here to talk about Dave Matthews Band. We're here to talk about money. So Bill's here is going to be here to share his knowledge and wisdom with us about money and how to get that bag. So first question for you, that's Dave Matthews, not Dave Matthews related. So with Focus Lab, with there being so many ways to potentially charge for the work, hourly, project-based, like whatever, time-based, how do you guys go about charging for your projects?
So, as everyone might suspect, it's been a long journey, right? So the company's 13 years old now. The early days, it was straight up hourly. What can you get? And when I say early days, I'm talking about like me in a chair at a shitty Goodwill used desk in my bedroom, right? Like trying to get $40 an hour to design business cards for local business owners. And when I achieved that status, I was like, I'm gonna be rich. $40 an hour, right? You're like, okay, 40 hours, 40 times 4 weeks. Oh my God, I'm gonna be able to make so much money. So it all kind of starts there because that's all that you know. And for what it's worth, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. I think that is appropriate to the journey that we all take. But as you grow and learn more, you realize this paradox which exists, which is I'm becoming better at my craft, therefore I am faster. But if I work faster and I deliver better work, I get paid less because I charge hourly. Well, that doesn't sound right. So along with other conundrums that I'm sure we'll get into in the episode. So at this point now, 13 years in, and many years previous to today, we switched completely to just a fixed price model. Meaning, very specifically, someone comes to us and says, we need A, B, and C. Consider that kind of brand work, maybe some web. And we give them a set price. And we say, knowing what we know about the work you're asking for, it will take X long. We don't get into hours. We just say it'll take a number of weeks, anywhere 12 to 40 weeks sometimes. Some of these projects get really long. And then here's the cost associated with that. Why is that better? Well, first, because of the reason I just said, which is you can work fast and efficient and actually win on the back of that. You could finish a project early. Now, I want to hesitant when I say early, but you could finish it. You could be more efficient in the project because of your capabilities and still get that set price, which means your margins are going to be higher, right? You could also lose, though. Project could go over. And that's where you get into change requests and scope creep, and we can talk about that too. But at this point, it's fixed price, and we're not pinned to hours. The big win there, outside of just a personal business margin opportunity, is a customer experience win as well that people need to be aware of. When you have a project and you're solely working off of hours, the customer experience of that isn't great. What happens if you need to noodle around for 5 hours on this idea, and that idea is a bad idea and it gets wasted? In a fixed price model, that's just part of the exploration and nobody gives a shit. And an hourly based model, the client's going like, yo, seems like you used a lot of hours. You got nothing to show for it this week. What's the deal? Well, that's part of the creative process. Like, that's only going to go so far for so many people. So you kind of remove some of those really bad customer experience conundrums when you get away from hourly as well.
Yeah, we had a friend who was on the show, Pete. He kind of just talking about like how some of their pricing, like you're literally paying for me to sit here and stare at my walls and kind of think through this thing. Like that's part of my expertise. That's what you're paying for. This is what you get in that project pricing, rather than doing that in the hourly thing. But Yeah, $40 an hour. That's 6.5 breakfast sandwiches. If I'm doing my math correctly.
Yes.
They come with 6.5 breakfast sandwiches.
I literally can remember it in my bones when I was able to go from like 25 an hour to 40. And I even remember, I guess this would be another quick hot tip. I remember when we made particular changes from even like 40 to 75 an hour. And I was very nervous that we were going to lose clients at that point because of that price hike. And one client very specifically said, I'm surprised it took you so long to move your prices up. You're worth even more than this. And I was like, holy shit, I've been thinking about this incorrectly. I didn't even think that there would be people thinking that I should go up. I just thought everybody would be like, no, who wants to pay more? Everybody wants to pay less, right? Well, not if you have the right client.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's like there's always a lot of discussion about red flag clients. Like I think sometimes the inclination is like, oh, it's sometimes hard to see the red flags. I don't think that's true. It's hard to like recognize them and then say no to the money that maybe you would get from them or charge extra because of that. It's like more talking about the green flag things. We've had a few clients like that too. They're like, we'll just like forget and we're like, hey, how do I pay you like right now? Like right after the project starts, and we're like, whoa, it's like, they're just like, we have money. Like we think you're good. We want to pay you. We want you to be successful. So those are definitely like moments to keep an eye out for that I think are like just as important as the red flags. Obviously, we're like, oh, let's work with this attitude as much as possible.
Unfortunately, I think the industry, and this might be because generally speaking in human life, it's easier to harp on the negatives and to retain the memories of the negatives, where equally it happens just as much as all those green flags, like you're saying. The fantastic clients that are like, this is great. I feel like this was still a steal for me. It was a total win. I loved working with you. I know you weren't the cheapest. I wasn't looking for the cheapest. Let's not forget those and just go out on Twitter and bitch about the like, oh, pour me this, pour me that. I don't know. I think we got to balance that scale.
I don't even know if there is a green flag emoji. Like that's how.
Right.
Like, maybe there is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
There should be.
There's a red flag one for sure. Yeah, it's a good kind of moment. You had mentioned too, like that sort of emotional, I don't know if it's like a bad feeling, but at least an anxious or nervous feeling when you're like, I need to raise my rates, or I should raise my rates. I know I'm better at this than when I was charging $40 an hour. Like, I know this to be a fact. I don't know if anyone will agree with me when I say it out loud. I don't know if it should be 60. I don't know if it should be 160. There's this weird moment, and like the higher that number goes, maybe you do start to like feel bad, especially if you're going back to a good green flag client or something, or somebody who's been with you since day one. Like we have a few of those now where it's like, I'm sure we're undercharging them. They've been so good to us. They're sort of like legacy clients in a way. But how did you manage that? Like, you mentioned the long journey, like there's been several price hikes, I'm sure, and model changes throughout that. For us, there's been a few of those as well, but there's a really familiar feeling that sort of comes along with like, okay, someone's got to send this email or have this meeting. How have you navigated that? And, like, there's definitely this, like, it's correct. I don't think it's like that's the feeling, but I mean, maybe it's just fear of rejection or something. Maybe talk about your experience with that as you've changed throughout the years.
I think as a business owner, freelancer, small agency, whatever you want to call yourself, I don't know if it's rejection. It's probably fear of, I don't want to scare people away because I need money. It's like a survival instinct, right? Like I need money to survive, and I don't want to jeopardize that at all costs. How do you get past that? I think over time, we all naturally mature to a state where we're like, I just got to do this thing. I can't think about it anymore. I know it's the right move to do, and I got to get more money. I got to get paid. So you can kind of push through that initial fear. What I would tell people is, what happens is you just got to take the shot. Your whole entire life, professionally and personally, but let's talk about professionally, you're literally just taking shots, right? You're trying things, you're testing things. You don't know what will actually work. Some are very low risk, some are high risk, but you don't really know. This is just one of those things. You got to shoot your shot. Send the damn email out. What's the worst thing that one person is going to say? They're not going to go out on the internet and be like, you won't believe the nerve of this company. They're trying to charge me X, and they're not going to scare everybody else away, right? So put it in a vacuum, keep it in a bubble, and just shoot it to the one person. Hey, this is some new price, blah, 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 blah. I think what happens is as soon as you have that positive reaction, that green flag like we just talked about, that will start to remove the majority of that fear and survival instinct of like, oh, this might not be all that bad. Sure, some people will walk away. That also doesn't mean they hate you. It doesn't mean they're mad at you. It just means you're not the right option for them anymore. And that is okay for both parties. So getting to that type of mindset faster is really great. Thankfully for me, I'll plug my business partner, Eric, very specifically. He was faster on that mindset evolution than I was. He was the one going like, do we got to raise our rates? Do we got to raise our rates? And I'm like, oh God, I don't know. Oh God, I don't know. So I did have somebody almost like pulling me along and saying, we got to do this. We got to do this. Okay, you're right. We got to do this. And we did it. And it turned out great. And I'm like, holy shit. Thank God we did that. The other thing I would say is you can take it out of emotion and just be very practical. What do you need to make to hit the type of margins that you need to make this job that you're doing worthwhile? If you do some math, we'll go back to the $40 an hour. I'd be interested, like, does that sound really low to everybody listening? Are there people that are in that window? I suspect we're all over the place. But if we just use that as a number, that $40 an hour, if I do that math and I say, okay, well, I can't work 40 hours a week, all billable. Certainly there's going to be some other shit in there. If I can only do this and I have these costs of living and this, and you break it all down and you find out I could literally make more if I worked at McDonald's, even though it doesn't seem that way, then I think you've got your answer, right? It's no longer an emotional courage task. This is dumb. You're doing the job to make money, right? We all care about people. I really care about people. I try to do things not for money. But at the end of the day, like, we're not just doing this shit for fun and for free. So again, maybe like doing the math would be a way to help people get to that conclusion as well.
Yeah. I love that practical approach. Like I personally need like as many little practical games or math in my head. So a lot of times when we're thinking about it, just my internal process is like, okay, like we only have to get 3 instead of 5 now to say yes to this, right? Like that's a really impactful math because obviously you don't need as many clients anymore, or you can do more clients because you're faster now, whatever the decision-making process is. But I always kind of like just say this in my head. It's like, we don't need as many people to believe in us at this rate. And your point, I think, is a really good one as well. Is like, you change who you're a good fit for. And I didn't realize that until we're coming up on, passing 5 years. So not as long as you've been going through these iterations, but it's like an embarrassingly recent discovery for me is like that simple math of it. You just, the survival instinct you mentioned, I think is very real, especially if you started the thing or you're a freelancer. Like you remember every piece of the history and how hard it was to get those first 3 clients. So giving one away feels almost insane until you've done it a few times.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it too, like as a practical thing, is like you said, you may lose 1 or 2 or whatever number of people who just can't afford this, but as you gain customers who are paying you in this new price range, a lot of times you get a lot of customers through word of mouth or referrals, and they're going to refer you to people who can't afford you at that rate, because once they have that conversation, they're like, oh, who did you work with? We work with Focus Labs. Like, out of curiosity, what did they charge you? And they're like, oh, this is what we paid. And they're like, okay, that sounds reasonable. We could pay that. So then like now you're kind of like, you're getting into a new bucket of potential customers because now you've gotten 1 or 2 to say yes to this new price.
Yeah, it is scary, but that point you made is 100% accurate. There's a world where you could throw out a price and someone's going to walk away from you because it is so low, right? They're going to judge that price they're going to compare it to quality output. They're going to say, okay, if they're coming to Focus Lab and we threw out a price and it was $8,000, they're going to go, you guys must not be the real deal. because people in your category and clients like us are certainly expecting to pay way more than that. So what's wrong here? What's broken? Right? So that you have to think about all that psychology that goes into it. And I think what I would say is if you kind of feather this growth year over year, you're getting more comfortable raising your rates, or you're switching from an hourly to a fixed price. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a light switch. You're testing, iterating. You're growing your market share in that particular category. You're getting more clients in that particular category that are willing to pay more. It happens over a duration of time, but you have to start. The first domino has to drop.
Yeah. I think like what you just said there was a huge thing that both Matt and I realized too, as we were kind of at some point in our 5-year iteration realized that, like, you know, these prices are gonna scare away the customers that we actually want because they're too low. Like, they're just gonna think we're cutting corners somewhere. We're not who we say we are, or they won't have the confidence in us to be able to kind of execute on this. Like, so yeah, that helped us to kind of like, well, we need to, you know, raise our rates to be who we want. Basically, that old adage of like, dress for the job you want, not for the job that you have, kind of thing. It's like price for the agency and studio you want to be, not who you are right now.
What if Mercedes literally dropped all their car prices to like 15 grand, but the quality was exactly the same? Everything that they do, the standards, everything was right. I feel like a giant segment of their customers would not buy a Mercedes, and they're not doing it just to show money, but they would ask themselves, something ain't right. There's no way that car is that good. Even if Mercedes was like, listen, it's the same car. We're just taking a hit. We just really want to like make this more reasonable and economic for everybody. People would balk at that shit and they'd go buy Porsches and they'd go buy other stuff, right? So there's a lot of psychological power in pricing.
Right. Yeah. I think people will leave too because of the loss of prestige as well. Where it was like anybody can afford this now. Like, this, I don't stand out. So it's like, I think he's not special. It's like, I think being able to work with Focus Lab was like, yeah, we got our brand done by Focus Lab. Like, yo, you guys got in with them. Like, they have like a long ass wait list. We're trying to get in with them. We can't afford them. So that's pretty sweet that you got to have a brand done with them. But yeah, it's kind of that prestige idea. So kind of a follow-up question to kind of your first part about kind of like switching from hourly to project pricing, and knowing you guys have like a team at Focus Lab. I think this question is interesting, particularly to me. You know, as a service-based business, obviously we need to bring in more money than we're sending out to keep the lights on. So I guess there's two questions here. Like, how do you know, one, that you're charging enough for a project? Are you guys tracking that somehow through like, you know, time tracking or whatever, at least internally? Or do you do anything where like you kind of, when you do a mix of the team that's working on a particular project, like, you know, like, oh, Hein and Matt are going to be this, their hourly rate as like kind of more senior dudes on the team are higher than, you know, John and Jill, who are, you know, newer, their hourly rate is not as high, so I have to price accordingly for that to make sure that this project is as profitable. Like, does that roll into the equation in any way? This may be even more complex than what you guys.
No, you did. You landed on it. You landed on all the math that happens kind of in the back end, if you will, that the clients don't need to be bothered with, right? That just tell me how much that the thing's going to cost, and don't hit me with any surprises. On the back end, yes, we have to know, did we lose our ass on that project, or did we do really well? And one of the first ways you do that is to track the time that goes into the project. So all the billable team members, right, writers, strategists, project managers, designers, anyone that's shipping work tracks their time to the project. At this point, we've been doing it so long, and our offering is so narrow, which is ultimately our branding. I was going to say package. I hesitate to use that word. We don't have packages, but like before we were brand and web, right? Big websites get big and squirrely. We don't do that anymore. So how we offer brand to the world, we know what that offering looks like so well that we can price it fairly easily now, knowing what we know, right? Generally, we need to be in this window regardless of who's on it, but then we can get even more technical of who's on it and those types of numbers to figure out what the margins will be. And what will happen is, when I say the growth team, really I'm thinking about sales. The sales team will then run the margins on that. Okay, if we work this if a designer works this many hours on it, and that's about average for projects of this size, and a strategist works this many weeks and hours on it, and that's average of a project this size, and nothing goes squirrely, we should end up at this margin. Is that the margin we target? Nope, it's a little bit low. Okay, we need to add more cost on top to account for more hours work, blah, blah, blah. It's all that math that's happening. And like I said, we've been doing it for so long that generally we are in a really good window. It's very rare that we have a project go so substantially over that we are like, wow, that one really lost us a lot. Because the other topic that we didn't get into just yet is also change requests. Yes, you could do a fixed price, but like there's still going to be stuff that happens, right? Oh, the board needs to review this. We need an extra 2 weeks. Well, shit, that's not accounted for in the schedule. We should have known that up front. Got to add 2 weeks. Where's that cost? Often we will split that cost as a good measure. First, change request conversation. We don't always want to be the type of company that's like, as soon as something new pops up, it's like, cha-ching, we got to charge you. That's a delicate balance. And then if more change requests occur, then you add more cost, you add more time to continue to protect and preserve the profitability of the project so that our company can be profitable and can pay payroll and not just be, again, doing this purely for fun.
Thinking about like, we get into the other side of like pricing. And first I wanted to hit on like your comment about change requests, because I think that's a miniature version of raising your rates and has a similar feeling, right? To where you're like, and maybe even worse sometimes, you're like, we told you it was $10,000. We're a month into a 3-month project or whatever it is. And they've already sort of like tossed the 2-week extension of the timeline in, right? Like it's nothing, probably in a quick email or real quick at the end of a call. And it's like, oh, that's a way bigger deal than we're saying. And, you know, it's now a, 3 months and 2-week project. Like that's a percentage, a significant percentage in timeline increase. And now you have to do this thing again, whether it's emotional or are they going to walk away from the project? I don't want to nickel and dime them. I thought you said it was a really good thing about maybe splitting the cost, maybe talk about the mindset of doing that and how you would maybe explain that to them, how you approach it. Because I think a lot of people always know when that happens and they know they should get paid more because it's more. So how do I broach this little pricing? Because it feels like you're increasing the price, I think, especially for freelancers. And when you're smaller, you're like, oh, like this is a big project for me. I don't want to be weird about it, but it's the right thing to do, I think, undeniably. So curious how you kind of approach the split cost or that conversation.
The right client will also 100% understand. If one of you were building a house and in the architectural plans, there was not a third bathroom going off the side of the house, and all of a sudden you told the builder halfway through, oh God, we really need a third bathroom. You wouldn't just expect that there would be no time or cost adjustment for that. So I would just share that most clients understand that as well. Now, there's an added conundrum, which is maybe they understand it, but they still have to go to their boss to get that approved, and the boss might not understand or like that idea. So yes, you got to lead with courage. That's actually one of our core values in the company. And it is in these moments that you could really lean in to that value, which is, I got to speak up. The people that can speak up, whether you're a freelancer, small agency, and you're the point person on that project, whether you're a PM or a designer, whatever, the ability to speak up is so valuable. Like you gotta be able to get past that hurdle and be like, oh, okay, I just heard you say something. It seems like that's gonna add time, but how you approach that conversation is everything. It's not, oh, you just added time, we're just gonna send you a thing, right? You need to then be human. Hey, that thing you said, yeah, I agree, actually. It does make sense that we should add that. Man, we did not account for that in the scope. We're going to go back and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to see, so you don't even hit them right there with it, because you really should talk about it. We're going to see what that affects. Sometimes we'll do a swap out, no added cost or time, but let's remove things that maybe you think were not as pivotal for the project. And let's now put in this thing that is now newly very important. Or you still want everything, let's do a change request. And so here's how we would kind of go about that. And this is not every time, but when appropriate, we will say, here's a change request. We know this is the first time we're talking about a change request. We want to make sure that you feel like you're getting what you need and you're not just getting basically more cost the whole way. We're going to do you a solid. We're going to eat half of the cost. You're adding 2 weeks. We're going to pay for the first half of it by charging you nothing. We would just ask you to pay for the second half of that, which would be that second week. And it shows you're in it together. That's a very important psychological step in retaining what you want in the relationship, which is trust and care and all these things. If you can afford that, right? Like, so, you know, it has to be right for you in that instance. But what we also say is, but for the next one and the ones moving forward, they're now on you, okay? Right? So it allows you to have that conversation in a very comfortable space instead of immediately, blah, now you're on the hook moving forward. You kind of eat that with them at first, and then they know the expectation is set. So by the next time you have to have the conversation, it's not new. They're going, I know we've added 2 more weeks. I know we got it. Okay, great.
Yeah, I think a couple things there. One, I think this like pre-assumes that you've already done the initial homework with figuring out like what do you need to charge in order to make money, like have this be profitable, and there being a healthy enough margin in it. And once you have that conversation, then you can like kind of have this, you know, this little give, as you said, like, hey, like an example of this is like we had like landscapers come in like recently, they like cut down, they did some stuff, and there were like a couple trees that they knew we definitely didn't want because we were like, we fucking hate these type of trees, we want to get rid of all of them. And they're like, hey, you mentioned that, so like you have 2 trees here, we normally charge $200 to cut each down, like we'll do it for $100 each. Like I would assume they have that in their margin. They have a chainsaw. It's gonna take them 2 seconds to cut it down. Like it's gonna be zero work. But but you know, they had to broach that conversation because I wasn't gonna just throw it out there like, hey, cut these down because I want to pay to cut it down. They brought it up, and ultimately we decided like, yeah, we'll just take care of it because we have a chainsaw, we can do it. But that was their way of kind of saying like, hey, we normally do it for 2, but since we're already out here, we'll do it for 1. The other thing that I wanted to ask about, especially because of this, like these change requests and knowing what's brand work, there's a lot of like heart to the art and the science of it all. That you know, you guys have like probably limited revisions and things like that. So if someone bumps up against like, hey, like this is another revision, like we're gonna have to charge for this, like does that kind of usually examples of when these kind of like change orders and scope changes like happen?
Yeah. So it's important to continue to kind of pin back to the customer experience. Don't create a world where the scope is the timeline is so freaking tight where you know you're going to fall into a change request, knowing that that's not a great customer experience. So how do you do that? For us, if we are working, let's just say with a larger client, and it's clear that there will need to be more time than normal to review things, to take it to a board, for probably a bit of like communication conundrum as it goes up and down the chain. And maybe by week 4, you thought you were in a good spot only to have it kind of bombed by somebody that finally saw it over there. Account for those upfront in the scope, in the price, and the timeline, right? So we're already baking in it's like some padding, if you will. Okay, this is a really big client. Let's make sure we bake in a couple extra weeks that we don't plan to use. But if we need them, they're there. And that gives us even more time before we have to broach the change request conversation. So it's trying to set yourself up for success in that way. And I wanted to come back to one other point, which it's escaping me now. Shit. It'll probably pop up when you ask another question. But so
as host, it's my job to interrupt you when you're having your like peak thought. So
yes.
I'll try to keep doing that.
Yeah. I want to make clear, do not assume that a company of my size, which is 30 people and been around for 13 years, does not have a lot of revisions and changes and stuff. That is not true. We are all playing the same game. We have had, even as recently as like last year, clients, dude, we're shipping them like round like 19 of their visual identity, right? And we are shipping weekly. That's 19 weeks. We don't ship in between those. Those are literally 1 week segments I'm talking about. Round 19 is in week 27 or something because strategy happens, there's verbal identity happening, and then we're kind of rolling into design. Other clients are falling in love with something in week 4 or 5, 6 or 7, style guides going out at week 9, right? So you just never really know what you're up against. The game changes as the clients get bigger. That's not even to imply that that's bad. The game is just different. You're playing a different version of the sport. I found it. Hey, I actually think maybe the most important takeaway, not to get ahead of tips, the most important takeaway, if you're thinking about like, how can I make more money? It's not how can I simply just charge more? How can I get comfortable telling people this is going to cost more? How can I find clients that will pay more? Those are all kind of like pretty big mountains to climb. The most efficient, and I would say maybe easiest way to make more money is to get better at selling your work. A la getting that client to sign off on the work you've shipped in week 3, not week 19. If you're able to do that, your margins skyrocket in a fixed price model. Having the ability to do that will really allow you to make big bucks. Whether someone listening is charging $5,000 for a logo visual identity exercise or $100,000 for a giant rebrand, technically their margins could be higher at that lower number. You'd have to do more work to get to the total revenue count that's up over here in the other company. Drive your margins up, drive your margins up, drive your margins up. And one big way to do that is being really good at pitching the work. If you just live in a world where you put logos on white pages, we're still susceptible to this too, let's be real. Logos on white pages, and you say, which one do you like? Think about that as eating up your margin. Because every week, that process is like, oh, I don't love it yet. I don't love it. I don't love it yet. I don't love it yet. Versus, I built this presentation, and I'm going to get you freaking jacked up through a narrative and real strategy and purpose of what we've just made. And I'm going to get you so freaking jacked up by the time you see the logo, you don't even give a shit what it is because you're like, sure, I don't need to personally love that logo. I know everything you're trying to express, and I do think that thing aligns to that. Now you're talking about earlier sign-offs. Now you're talking about really winning from a money perspective.
That's awesome. Like this is why you're the first ever repeat guest. Dropping nugs before the nugs segment.
But we got to practice what we preach too. I really want to be real there. Something most important to me in my life and my personal values is keeping it real. I never want to be faking it like we've got everything figured out. And a lot of what I say and what we do as a company, we also have to continue to remember to practice. It's easy to fall into the trap of, do you like this on a white background? We all do it.
Absolutely. This is the best part of like doing this kind of show or whatever. Is like, we've all talked about these things. It's like, how well are we implementing this? Like we believe in these things. Like we haven't had a conversation about where this is in the process in a little bit. And we're doing a lot of different types of projects now than we were the last time So really, really appreciate that part of it. Is it's like for us too, it's like, okay, this not just like, oh, we're changing our process, but like we talk about this. We believe in some of these same things you're talking about. But I'm like, it's been a minute. It's been a minute since we've really intentionally been like, okay, no more white logo presentations. Though I'm a big fan of selling white space. Like people really gravitated. We're like, ooh, look at that white space. Said no client ever.
I'll add one other note that I think is important for people to hear, and it's not about money. I was having a similar conversation about this idea of like, well, certainly companies of that size don't have that problem anymore, right? Because someone was asking me a similar question, like, certainly you guys don't have to deal with this, right? And I'm like, why would you assume that? Like, no, of course we have to deal with that. And then I said, well, yeah, that's strange because I assume that people like Brian Collins at Collins Agency have so much stature and so much power that certainly they don't have to do a lot of revisions. And certainly all their clients trust them 100% with everything they pitch and say, right? That answer has to be no. It has to be no. I'm going to ask him one of these times on just a LinkedIn post, like, yo, dude, do you run into the same problems we all run into? Because we all want to know. I would bet a high percentage that we are all dealing with the same shit. And I think it's important for people to realize that. I don't want a freelancer listening to this saying those types of things.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we'll make a special request for our videographer to make a clip of this
There you
question.
go. Yes.
So then we can have it provide it for you, and then you can add it to your LinkedIn. So we can
It's just
get
a
it done
clip
that
of
way.
being like, we haven't had any issues since before pandemic times. It's like we did. It was a short episode. It was just like we did it. We arrived.
Well, as Matt has already said, you've created an experience where it's like getting that extra nugget when you pay that. You ask for a 6-pack, you give us that 7th already, but we're going to move into our nug section here as to have you provide more wisdom for us. So I guess like the first thing we want to ask you is like, do you have any tips on handling like what we'll call fun pricing conversations with clients, especially if they balk at the price?
Yeah. So this is where I start to get a little bit out of my realm. I'm no longer in sales calls. I'm no longer really pitching it on the front lines of that. But what I would say is, what comes to mind, there is a book that's pretty short and easy to read called Win Without Pitching. Blair, what's Blair's last name? Hens? Am I just making that up? I don't know Blair's last name.
We'll look it
Sorry,
up in the
Blair.
background. Yeah.
But
We'll put
yes,
it in the notes.
he's a really big voice on pricing and those things. So if you're listening to this episode and you care about pricing and pricing models within agencies, like that's a book you almost like have to read. Win Without Pitching Manifesto, I think is the title. So
Yep.
I would
Blair
say,
Ents.
hey, I did get it right.
Yeah, you got it.
Read that. Regardless of what I say now is my answer, read that book because that's going to be way more valuable. What my answer would be is, again, make it non-emotional. Figure out what your margins need to be. Figure out what your pricing needs to be. If your margins don't need to be high because you were like me in year one of this thing, which is like, all I need is ramen. I've got a really shitty small apartment that costs me nothing and I have a dog. You can price however the hell you want to price. And feel free doing that. There's nothing wrong with that. But as your overhead and costs maybe start to increase and you need to make sure you're pricing right, just do that thing. Do that math so that when you're having that conversation, it's not, you're not feeling guilty, right? It's not about guilt. You know what you need to make. And you having that conversation with somebody like, hey, okay, so yeah, I can do this work and that's going to cost, $5,000. We all cringe when we throw a price out. At the same time, the customer on the other side is just waiting on the edge of the seat to hear the price because they don't know what the hell you're going to throw out there. The best thing to do is kind of going back to the point of just like helping them understand where the value is, keeping your conversation focused on what their actual pain points are and not just on dollars. Hey, you really do need this thing. I know you need it. You've expressed that you need it. I've identified some key ways that I can really help you move the needle on that problem. And by the way, the cost is going to be X, right? Like just don't hinge the whole thing on dollar bills. And again, don't be afraid of people walking away. Matt made the point well earlier, which is you only need, if your prices are double, you only need half the people to say yes to stay at the same exact mark. And that is pretty powerful. Not a sales guy.
And our producers, if you're listening, he said Matt made a point well. Like I really want to crystallize that. That's never happened before, so just want to get a short of that or something out there. Another thing, like you did a great job earlier of talking about like these sort of non-obvious ways to boost margin, like not just raising your prices, but getting better at pitching so that there's not 100 rounds. That was a good answer to part of this, but there's this other part, like we've talked about, like some projects have 3 iterations or 3 revisions, some have 19. And it's not necessarily true that one of those numbers is special, like in a global sense. But there is a point, like often too, where it's like helping clients close out a project, whether it's actually launching that website or launching that brand. You've probably experienced this, and I know we have. It's like there's this sort of like hesitancy, even if everybody likes the work, to put it out into the world. Like as creatives, we all know that feeling, whether we're making art or doing client work or doing spec work for fun or whatever, you still sort of like, right, is this right? Do you have any tips on that kind of part? There's this thing that happens a lot of times where there's like this pause of like, is it really ready? Is it really right? Both on creative side, but also like, we think this work is really good. It's way better than what you have now. Let's not wait around for another couple months.
I'm glad you said that, actually, because let's spend just a second on that. It's way better than what you have now. That immediate contrast goes a long way, going back to like the pitching point. If you're just in a vacuum looking at new, and you don't have contrast to old, literally in the deliverable, it will be harder for them to recall, is this actually much better? Even having to transition from a like, okay, your website's up over here and I'm looking at like a brand deliverable, you can't really put those two together. But if you've got some side-by-side stuff, not just logos, but identity systems and stuff, and you can really show, look how far you've come. I'm not saying this is going to make you the next Tesla, but it's certainly going to do better than what you have, right? Let's keep the benchmark at least maybe some like more realistic. Showing enthusiasm for the work is really going to go a long way for the client as well. If you are questioning it, but you're certainly not saying those things to the client, but your body language could be, right? So you want to be like, we've done great work here. The strategy is on point. Every rollout is a leap of faith. There's probably going to be some haters out there. Don't worry about that. That's just normal internet bullshit. All in all, this is significantly better than where you were. And don't forget, you're going to continue to build on this. You're going to continue to grow, mature, and you'll probably even update more things, 5 years from now or so. This is not the end. This is now just the new version of yourself to go out to the market. That type of conversation, I think, maybe brings them back down to earth. You don't want to hinge everything on, is everyone going to love it on Twitter on day one when you post the first image? Like, that's just like a bad thing to measure.
Twitter's never like
that's like
anything,
a vanity
so.
win. Yeah, and especially if you're going to Twitter, right? That's just a quick vanity win, and I don't even really care about those anymore. It's nice. Man, before big launches, I would be losing sleep the night before. Here's a great story. Everyone will love this. We were doing work for, it was 500px, stock photography website. Pretty big one as well. And this was back in the day. Shit, this might have been like year 5 of our business. So that felt like a really big project, and the client was great and a lot of iterations. We landed on the system, and it was going to launch that night. And that night my son was sick, and he wanted to be in our bed, and I wanted a good night's sleep. I slept in his bed. So that's to contextualize where I was when all this happened. So I'm in my son's bed with like Star Wars sheets. I wake up, I roll over, it's like 6 a.m. and I'm like, oh, it launched in the middle of the night. Let me just see. And I like roll over, I look at my phone, and the first comment I see on Twitter is like, this is the dumbest shit I've ever seen. It looks like a logo that should be on a freaking pizza box. What is this? And I closed Twitter, and I just went back to sleep, and I'm like, I refuse to let this be my life. I'm no longer going to do this, right? Like, people are going to have their opinions. It is what it is. We're all going to move on. And at the end of the day, it doesn't even really matter. So just, I would urge the creatives that are listening, don't pin yourself in your personal success to how people cheer you to the work. Yes, it's really nice. It makes you feel good. But ultimately what matters more is like, will it work? Will it help the company perform? You won't know that for a couple years. There's always going to be somebody out there that says it looks like something else. Just be open and ready for that. Don't even engage in that, quite honestly. Go out on a run, pick up your instrument, play guitar for a little bit. Do something that's going to get you out of that bubble, because that can really eat you up. If you're not careful, that will take you out of this career field. You will no longer like what you do because it will beat you down. And I think maybe some of that comes with age. I don't want to just imply that I got older and smarter, but I do think as you get older, you get a little bit more like leather-backed. You don't really like, I don't care
Definitely
anymore.
A few more calluses.
Yes,
for sure. Yeah. I think too, like especially with logos, right? Like, I mean this in the kindest possible way. So dumb. Like, it's such a dumb thing to talk about, like, regardless of how beautiful it is or whatever. Like, because no one's seen the creative brief or been in any of the meetings, it's a lot. The clients are making decisions along the way. It's not like a skills challenge for the design. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just, you're not grading what you think you're grading. Like, you might be right, but it's a totally different context. And anyone's been through, like, branding's hard. And the bigger the company is, the harder it's a difficult process to just get to a decision. And that doesn't mean, like I said, like they turn out wrong. Like, they're probably just way more right than any designer could ever, like, side eye glance at and be like,
sure,
not what I would have
exactly
done. It's
right.
Like, well,
which is a good.
You're also
learning
not going to
point.
spend 3 months making your version of it and then putting your version on Twitter, which will probably get a similar response regardless if it's better or not.
Like, so let us all remember that when we're out there trying to dog something, right? That's my first thought anytime I see something now. I think about, I don't know what that creative team went through. I don't know what the actual goals were. And I don't know what of this even shifted from what they really felt like the client should ship or not, right? So I just keep my damn mouth shut. Not my projects, not my problem. I hope it works out, right? Like, I can stay focused on what I can control. Everyone's too quick to judge, right? Like,
That's going to be my, like, completely plain reply to every logo launch. Hope it works out. Like, just know, like, it's like, is he being sarcastic?
I'm not going to be the one
it's
spreading hate out
just
there.
Hope it,
Not
I
at all.
hope it works out.
Well, we want to be mindful of your time, Bill. We could talk to you forever, which is why we love having you on. But we want to ask you one last question before we wrap up with our can of shameless plug. And question is, like, before we wrap up, any other tips or lessons that you'd like to share that we just haven't touched on? Parting thoughts?
I think we touched on a good bit, even outside of money. Don't dog other people's work. You don't know what the hell they went through to even try to get that thing out there. Really work on how you present and pitch your work, not just increasing pricing. And really the biggest thing that I try to say to most kind of like business owners that are just starting out, or people that are hungry, freelancers, whatever, that are really hungry to kind of like grow and whatever that looks like for them, is really just to be patient. This shit takes time, right? Some people do it faster than others, and you're going to be like, oh, the grass is greener, or they're doing it better than me, or I'm this age, how come I haven't achieved this or that? We all reach different statuses and different achievements at different times. I didn't even start Focus Lab technically till I was like 28, right? That's pretty old. Before Focus Lab, I was answering phone calls on a little tiny remote island off of Savannah that for people that wanted to rent vacation houses making $12 an hour, right? I'm not trying to show a like, oh my God, rise from the ashes kind of like story here, but I want to be relatable because I should be relatable. Focus Lab, yes, is successful in its own right. But like, it took me also a long time to figure out what I wanted to do and to learn and to even to start it, right? We were still clunky and failing at things. And even this year has been really challenging as we're at a new stage, a different level of clientele, and a market that's like batshit crazy, right? We're constantly learning. And the way that you get through that is just, you get up every day, you put your damn pants on, and you just get to work and you do the grind, and you try to be grateful for what you can be grateful for. You understand that there's going to be punches along the way, and you just got to be patient and roll with it. I know that's not everybody's jam, but for me, I do think that is the formula.
Yeah. Showing up.
Totally agree. Yeah, we show up, and then just like, I think having the time to reflect and trying to see how you can continue to make things 1% better. I think that's kind of like how Matt and I keep trying to approach things as well. We're like, we realize like, wow, it's coming up to 5 years. We're different now, 5 years in versus 5 days in, 5 months in, a year in. So that's the way we are.
It's like the Bill Gates
keep
quote.
Maturing and get better.
Yeah, you know that Bill Gates quote, which is like, you'll be disappointed at what you achieve in 1 year, but you'll look back and be shocked at what you achieve in 10. It's that type of feeling. Year over year, you're always going to feel like, I didn't accomplish everything. I'm not as far as I wanted to be. You look back 10 years, you will be shocked, literally shocked. I'm still shocked 13 years in to think we are 30 people doing the type of work for the type of people we are. Like, I didn't know that was in our cards. It's not what I envisioned to start, and it doesn't have to be. You just need to start.
Right. Yeah. And I think you've given people so much to, even if they've already started, to kind of like restart, rethink things. Like, this has really been great. And we really, again, want to thank you for being on the show. And as a token of our appreciation, like, we want to give you the floor and open things up for you to open up a can of shameless plugs.
Yeah, I usually don't have a shameless plug, but I did finally launch a book this year, so I'll plug it, like I've been doing a lot. Okay, so the book is Conquer Your Rebrand. Essentially what I did is I wrote a book about our entire branding process at Focus Lab. I wrote it for both potential customers to read it and say like, oh, that's a process I could see myself in. And now that I understand it very clearly, engaging with them will be that much more impactful. I also wrote it so that anybody interested in what the hell we do and how we do it, it's right there. Like, I literally wrote everything that we do in the book. So if you go to conqueryourrebrand.com, that will ultimately talk more about the book. It'll also shoot you to Amazon, which is where you will buy the book. So yeah, I want to plug the book. I spent a lot of time writing it. I think it is valuable for all the parties I just mentioned. I have a lot of talks with people that are like, I'm an agency owner and I bought your book. And I'm like, I knew that would happen. And I'm also happy that that happened, right? I don't think we need to be so protective of trade secrets and shit, right? Like, I don't even know if those things are true. This is our version of how we do our work. And there's my plug.
Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely go out and get that book. Read it. Incorporate it as well as everything else that we got in today from Bill. And with that, thank you everybody for being on, listening. We got another banger for you today, Dave Matthew band style banger out there.
47-hour episode.
Yeah, exactly. I would have been cool with this being like a fish level length like interview with Bill, because we love having you on and hearing your thoughts and insights and expertise and sharing them with us on Money Me.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And before we officially sign off, we want to thank everybody for tuning in to Money Me. Hopefully you got a ton of value out. If you didn't get any value out of it, you probably weren't listening to Bill today, but that's a topic for another day. In the meantime, your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Stay updated on our latest episodes of Money Me and our other show, Flow State, where we get even goofier than this and have even more fun with this. Check out Bill's episode. He did an episode of Flow State with us as well for more. And we'll be back with more premium content on design and pricing before you know it. So again, make sure you subscribe right now so you don't miss out on our drops. Do it.